All right, today we are diving deep into German Romanticism. And trust me, this isn't just about stormy paintings and super passionate poetry. This was a movement that totally blew up how we think about ourselves and our place in the world. So, here's our game plan. We're going to start with the storm and stress that got the whole thing started. Then, we'll meet the brilliant minds behind it all. After that, we dive into the really big stuff. How they totally redefined the self, why they believed art was the highest form of truth, and how they used irony in this incredibly cool modern way. Okay, let's set the scene. We're in late 18th century Germany. Everything is supposed to be about reason and logic. But something new is bubbling up under the surface. A kind of counter-movement that was all about raw, unfiltered emotion. And in the 1760s and 70s, it exploded. It was a movement called Sturm und Drang, which literally means storm and stress. And look, this wasn't just some new artistic style. No. This was a full-on rebellion against all the calm, neat and tidy rules of the time. It was all about art that was personal, messy, and totally passionate.
And here's the thing you've got to understand. This was way bigger than just art. It was a revolution in how people saw themselves. It was this massive turn inward, a deep dive into the powerful, wild, and sometimes really contradictory nature of the individual's soul.
So, who were the rock stars of this whole movement? Let's meet some of the writers and thinkers who really gave a voice to this new way of being. First up, you absolutely cannot talk about this era without talking about Goethe. I mean, his work Faust is basically the blueprint for the romantic hero. This guy driven by an insatiable hunger for more experience, more knowledge, more passion, and he didn't care what it cost him. Then we've got Friedrich Schiller. Now, he was a real firebrand, always pushing back against the old guard. He was a huge champion for freedom, and he had this amazing idea that experiencing art and beauty, what we call aesthetics, wasn't just a nice little hobby. He believed it was a direct path to becoming truly and utterly free. And then there was Novalis. This guy was a poet who went even deeper, exploring that mysterious, murky world of dreams, intuition, what we might call the preconscious. For him, the Golden Age wasn't the here and now. It was the Middle Ages, a time he imagined was filled with myth and magic and this amazing spiritual unity.
So, even though these guys were all different, they were kind of obsessed with the same things. They loved old folktales, stories of knights and castles. They were endlessly fascinated with the inner universe of the self. And they were all starting to play with this really new, complex, and ironic way of looking at the world, which, don't worry, we'll get to.
All right, this is where things get really deep. How did all this artistic energy actually turn into a brand new philosophy, a completely new way of understanding reality itself?
Well, it all kicks off with the philosopher Immanuel Kant. He basically dropped a philosophical bomb on everyone. He pointed out this massive gap, this chasm. On one side, you have the world as we see it and experience it. He called that phenomena. But on the other side is the world as it really is, the noumena. And Kant said we can never, ever get there. Our minds just can't touch it.
And this is where the Romantics just went for it. First, another philosopher, Fichte, looks at Kant's chasm and says, hold on, what if our ego, our self, actually creates the world we see? He essentially built a bridge. But then Schelling comes along and takes this final, incredible leap. He just completely gets rid of the chasm altogether. He says, our consciousness and the natural world, they aren't two separate things. They're one. Okay, so if your mind and the entire universe are basically the same thing, how on earth do you even begin to understand that? Well, forget science, forget pure logic. For the Romantics, the answer was crystal clear: art. Schelling believed that art wasn't just some pretty thing to hang on a wall. To him, it was the ultimate form of philosophy. He thought it was only through that spark of intuition, when you're creating or just deeply experiencing art, that the mind could finally understand its own deep unity with nature. It was the highest level of self-awareness you could possibly reach.
In Schiller, he just took that idea and ran with it. He said that this aesthetic experience was the ultimate form of freedom. It was this special space where we could escape the physical world, escape the boring rules of society, and just be truly free.
And that brings us to our final and maybe the trickiest idea of them all: irony. But we're not talking about sarcasm here. For these Romantics, irony was a serious philosophical tool for making sense of the world.
So what do they actually mean by irony? Yeah, it's way, way deeper than just a witty comeback. For them, it was a whole way of thinking, a real philosophical stance.
A critic named Friedrich von Schlegel probably explained it best. He said,
Irony is the ability to hold two totally opposite ideas in your head at the exact same time. It's seeing something as both playful and deadly serious, as both completely open and deeply hidden. It's realizing that nothing is ever just one thing.
It basically means you're constantly shifting your point of view. You can see life as this huge, serious, dramatic tragedy, and also as kind of a hilarious game. You can search for absolute ultimate truth while knowing deep down you'll probably never fully find it. It's about being comfortable living right in the middle of that paradox.
Schlegel even talked about the irony of irony. Now, this is a real mind-bender. It's the idea that even when you try to explain irony, you're already trapped because language itself isn't perfect. The very attempt to communicate something fully is always going to fall a little short. And honestly, I think anyone who's ever struggled to find just the right words can totally relate to that.
Which really brings us to a huge final question. When you look at our culture today, so obsessed with being authentic, so drenched in layers and layers of irony, always looking for some kind of deeper personal meaning, you just have to wonder, right? Are we all in our own way the children of Romanticism?